what would Lestat think of Taylor Swift or like Chappell Roan?
I think he would love Chappell Roan. I think she's fantastic. You know, I think one thing about Lestat is that he loves performers. He loves musicians. He loves artists. He is a creative being. You know, his whole way of expressing and operating through the world is through performance. You know, so there is that. I think, you know, even though in season 1, you know, he kills the tenor, and which you know, he probably definitely did. You know, he definitely that guy was terrible in his mind, and you know, he put him through some severe suffering. And he has a dark streak, a mean dark streak to him. But for the majority part, I think he would give most artists the benefit of the doubt. He doesn't like Jefferson Starship. but other than that, there's most things that he liked.
The Vampire Lestat, the book, came out at a time where like rock and roll was at a very different place.
Sure.
And the show has taken such incredible liberties for the first 2 seasons that it doesn't feel like you're bound to the conventions of the Vampire Lestat book, all that particularly anyway. So when creating what this Lestat looks like as a rock star and performs like as a rock star, what was that process like for you?
It's really a sort of like portrait of an artist, I suppose, which was Roland's sort of point of direction and a constant point of reference. It was like how Lestat, you know, is a creative being and how he kind of discovers himself, works himself out, kind of really nuts through his issues through his art. You know, that is sort of one of the main arcs of the season, is that he's starting the music as a point of deflection from how he's portrayed in the book. So he's like, yeah, I'm a vampire. I'm going to sing about being a vampire and being an evil vampire. So the songs are sort of like set they're sort of ironic in a way, and they're full of bitterness, and there's sort of, there is a playfulness to it, and you know, like in the way that he's sort of interacting with Malloy in the first couple of episodes, is he's sort of like, well, I'm going to do an interview and I'm going to talk about being a vampire, like Louis talks about being a vampire, which is, you know, obviously in the greater schemes of things, something kind of sacrilegious for him to do as a vampire, but it's also that kind of feeds into his music, and he's playing this shtick, this sort of, like, in a way, like, you know, Ozzy Osbourne drinking the bat blood, like he's doing the sort of like, and that is generating some underground fans, and, you know, but I think deep down, he actually wants to be taken seriously as a musician, as an artist.
Thousands of fans love you.
I want millions, billions. And progressively throughout the show, the music changes, and he's still looking for his sound. And particularly by the time you get to episode 5, everything changes, and the music becomes much more adult, I suppose.
Yeah, it's very exciting because it's like fictional pop songs, and by that I mean like pop songs that are performed by characters that it's supposed to be their song, whatever. They can be so good, and I think, you know, we've seen a lot of that recently with like the K-pop Demon Hunters thing.
Sure.
It's been really exciting to watch you kind of, because I've seen the first 3 episodes, so I've seen like Long Phase. The opening title track, I'll Fall Down. And then I forget the one that's called that they play in episode 3 about Wolf Killer?
Wolf Killer. No, Biggest Fan is what that one's called.
So in that episode, he references like the Police's "I'll Be Watching You."
Yeah.
And then we get like a full like music video that feels very 80s.
Yeah.
Like it took me back. I love that. I'm curious, like, what is it like? Because it's so interesting. Because as you point out, this has always been a show about an unreliable narrator, but we are getting both him posturing for Daniel's camera, and then him like explaining himself in the Failures albums. And then him playing himself in like a music video understanding of his own legacy. Like, I guess, how do you translate all those variants?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, like, just in the way that his backstory was brought up, or his transformation was brought up via Louis through Malloy, it was sort of hard to read. It's a very traumatizing transformation, and he's got a lot of unpacked baggage, you know, left because of that. And so the way that, you know, he chooses to talk about it in the real world is this guy was obsessed with me, and like he's a loser, and here's his little fun ballad, like Taylor Swift kind of like pop song there you go, Magnus, that you can have that. But he's not really able to shake it, and obviously the reality of it is not simple kind of like at your window ballad. It's much more complex, but he's trying to control his narrative at any point in time. And that's the thing, is like Louis is trying to get to he's actually actively seeking to get to the center himself, and Lestat is actively trying to obfuscate the situation and not expose himself, but he has no choice. It's constantly being thrown back in his face until he's forced to deal with it. And that's what the failures is we're now seeing somebody go through something that actually leads us through into future seasons, but like that he's had time to process, and that's when he can have some more self-reflection. Mm-hmm. Whereas where he is in the story, he doesn't want to have any self-reflection.
No. Talking to you now, I'm like, oh right, because that song is essentially attempting to like defang his abuser.
Yeah, he's like, it was nothing. It's like, he transformed, I wanted it to happen. And yeah, he abandoned me, but it was pathetic. Like I would be so annoyed if he was following me throughout the centuries. And, like he liberated me. He made me who I am, and look how fantastic I am. Like, this is amazing. Like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's not, and actually, it's a huge deal, and he doesn't want to make it very rightfully says to Malloy, like, who wants another sob story? Like, I'm not going to present to you my life as some big abuse narrative. I'm not going to sit here and wallow like Louis did and just talk about how painful my existence is and suffer when there are so many positive things about the situation that I'm in. But actually, he does have a lot of darkness and a lot of things that not just from, he's got two makers, he's got his mother and he's got Magnus, and both of those figures are very, very influential in, what forms him as a character, and are, abusive. Like, he's a highly sexualized character, because he's been sexualized from the beginning, from whether it's his mother wanting to kind of love him to the point of being with him because she wants to live vicariously through him, or whether it's his maker wanting that he sees on stage, that performer, that spark, and kind of eroticizing him and making him this kind of perfect immortal being. It's and then all he knows, the only way he knows how to express himself is by, like hitting on, thrusting around on stage and writhing around. And so we ask the audience to kind of like come with him on the journey. Maybe you don't understand it at first, but it's a slow unraveling that he begins to unravel too.
Totally. And at the end of episode 3, when like that moment with Magnus is parallel with Louis reading the 4 pages from Claudia's diary, Claudia and Lestat have always had things in common that seem to make him... It's that thing where like you're like, I don't like this person, and you realize the reason you don't like that person is because they have aspects of them that make you uncomfortable about yourself. Yeah. It's like, it feels like that moment. And the end of episode 3 just had me so caught up in that again, because we've seen the parallels across the first 2 seasons of what Lestat and Claudia do have in common, but it's also this moment of abuse that they've both endured.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about that is it's not something that either of them really need to talk about or address, or they have a mutual understanding, Claudia and Lestat, where they're kind of loggerheads. They sort of hate each other, but they have a lot of mutual respect between the two of them. And Louis does get involved in some of that stuff, and it's complex even in the sense that he's kind of taken those words and reading them himself. It is complex, and the writers never shy away from making these issues as complex and as truthful as possible. They want to keep presenting the questions. But yeah, it does highlight the transformation of Lestat and Claudia's experience. They are similar. They have a shared experience. So yeah,
I love seeing the reversal in the show, that we think we understand the thing. And in episode 1, he gets really worked up about the train scene. And then episode 2, they confirm through another scene that is like, he's not in, so it's his perception of what would happen. But it's like, it makes sense that he'd be so upset about the train scene where it seems like he's threatening her.
Yeah, and I think it's, you find out more about that throughout the season, like what actually happened. So I won't spoil it for you. But yeah, I think it's he's blindsided by that. I think it's a very painful thing. You understand why it's there in the book later on, but he's blindsided about it because he actually wouldn't do that, because I think he has he's
Because some of his other gripes are like, I know what infinitesimal means.
yeah, like that
But
kind
also,
of
like, when someone's, like, talking, like, when someone's subtweeting you online, you're like,
yeah.
I don't want to dignify this with an answer, but for the record.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, and that's the thing is a lot of his grievances with the book are petty.
yeah.
You know, he's not necessarily like everything that Louis said is wrong. He's not necessarily saying that. There are a few fundamental things that
My
are wrong.
hair was longer. I have a scar.
Yeah, like you didn't ever talk about all the wolf killing scars that I have all over my body that I've always had. Why am I Harlequin and why did I play Arlecchino in the Commedia dell'arte? Like, there's these things that don't. Why is Armand so like magnetic and alluring? Like, why? Obviously, it's like you got to think about who wrote it, obviously, which is important because Louis didn't really write that book. It was Malloy, but it's a lot of things that are very confronting. And yeah, Lestat didn't threaten Claudia with rape on a train. I mean, he just didn't do that. You know, he was difficult. He was a bastard, but he didn't do that. And there's this very specific reason why he didn't do that.
On TikTok, I'm sure you're aware there are a million fan edits that like, but it's also interesting what songs people are drawn to. Because just yesterday, I was, for research, looking at fan edits, and it's like people are using like Mitski and like Olivia Rodrigo's like Brutal. And I wrote down some of the other ones. So a Radiohead and Aqua, somebody Barbie Girl.
Really?
Yeah, there was a Barbie
funny.
Girl edit. Iconopop, the one of like,
Right.
I Don't Care, Panic at the Disco.
Okay,
Like, people
yeah.
are pulling all these different song inspirations, not necessarily saying that there's something that Lestat would like or not, but they are songs that to them speak to him.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, that's fascinating. I mean, I think that's the nature of the show. I mean, Malloy says it, like, I think it's in season 1, he's talking about Claudia, like, you put it out there and everyone else decides and there's nothing you can do about it. And I think that's the show in a way. I mean, we just, for us, it's, we have a great time making it. There's a lot of love put into it. We work very hard on it. We have so much fun doing it, and it is the one singular experience for us, and then it goes out into the world and it goes other places. And I think for me, like, yeah, the fact that people can make a fan video or put music to it, but I try and not engage too much and see all that stuff. But I think when I'm interacting, like, we had an amazing experience at New York Comic-Con where there was like a bootleg version of the argument between Louis and Lestat, which had come out earlier, which happens in episode 2. And then they played it for real at the New York Comic Con, and the whole crowd was like, sort of shouting the lines. I bet, very specific detail to pluck out of thin air.
I bet. Come on. Very specific detail to pluck out of thin air. What is the foot?
And it was, we had only just shot that a few months ago, and it was a kind of extraordinary experience. You just felt like, wow, it was just absorbed so quickly, and it is fun. It's a fun role to play, and I love to see drag kings perform him. I just love to see people, like, take it on themselves and have the opportunity to kind of like get into it too, because it's a fun experience.
Well, speaking to that, because that must have felt like a real Rockstar moment to like be like, we just shot this and people already know all the words.
Yeah, I don't know if I felt like I don't really know what a rock star feels like, apart from through my experience. But it felt very communal. It felt really lovely. Yeah.
I love that. Is that something you'd be interested in? Because K-pop Demon Hunters, Huntrix is effectively now an actual band because the performers, people love that song so much.
Well, I am doing some performances, or our performance, coming up. So, I feel like, Daniel Hart's done a really great job of writing these songs. There are some absolute bangers in there that will be slowly, eked out throughout the season. It's a really fun thing to do, to share it in a live capacity, we've been very sort of meta in the way that this season has been kind of like presented. And so it's kind of fun to crack open the meta even more a little bit and like put the vampire Lestat out in the real world and see how he operates.
I'm so excited because, like, one, I'm a glam rock fan, and the songs that we've heard at this point in the season are very kind of T-Rex, a little Bowie, but with, I would say, like, a little more aggression and a little more like a little more sex appeal, like a little more like oomph to it.
Yes, violence. I mean, he is. And look, a really key thing to Lestat is that he is so powerful that he could go into an audience, he could go into a performance and, like make them all love him.
Yeah.
Make them all, he could melt, like he does. He only does it once, which is in the trial in season 2. He completely manipulates the audience to give him the response he wants, which is to release Louis. But everything else he's doing is to elicit a genuine, like love for him. So he's not controlling them. He wants them to love him. He wants to connect with the audience. He wants them to respond to him in a way that is truthful, that he feels like he's earned. And that's why, he's kind of playing to small crowds. He's not necessarily like this big mega star, where he's kind of completely glamoured the whole world into turning. He's like, plugging away, trying to find his sound, trying to find his audience, trying to find his beat. And progressively, I think it goes into more what he truthfully is, which is an emotional being. He's a very sort of big, emotional power ballad sort of style kind of person. And I think we kind of get more towards that space.